Right, I think we are going to make a start. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar about CQC's consultation on improving how they rate and assess providers. This is a joint production between our law firm, RWK Goodman, and the Care Association Alliance. My name's Mei-Ling Huang. I'm a partner at RWK Goodman. With me is my colleague, Gemma Nicholas. Our firm specializes in supporting social care providers with every aspect of your business. Gemma and I specialize in troubleshooting and crisis management, but our firm also provides support for lots of other things: mergers and acquisitions, contracts, employment, immigration, and many other things. Today, we're really delighted to welcome Anna Knight and Joe Howes, who are representing the Care Association Alliance. The CAA is a collective of local care associations from across England, representing almost 10,000 care providers. Anna and Joe are also the chief executives of the Dorset Care Association and the Wiltshire Care Partnership, respectively. So thank you both for coming. We're on Zoom today, so I want to run through the functionality. Unlike Teams, which you're probably more used to, there is both a QA function and a chat function. So please use the Q&A function to ask questions. We will be picking those up throughout and trying to ask and answer them. And also use the chat function if you have a comment. We're going to have a few polls during this, and the session is being recorded. The slides and the recording will be available and sent to you afterwards. So our agenda for today is we're going to talk about the background of what's been happening at CQC, what will stay the same, what's going to change. We will go through the consultation questions one by one and discuss them. We'll then talk about what you can expect in 2026. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A and discussion. So why is CQC consulting with us yet again? By way of background, they've had a pretty rough couple of years. In October 2024, 2 reports about CQC were published, both of which contained harsh criticisms of the regulator's performance, both overall and in relation to the implementation of the single assessment framework. On October 15th, 2024, Dr. Penny Dash published her report on the effectiveness of CQC as a regulator, and some of her high-level findings were that there had been a loss of credibility at CQC. CQC had not been listening to their own people who had been jumping up and down about the problems there. There had been a massive reduction in inspection activity from 15,800 inspections in 2019-20 to only 6,700 in 2023-24. And she suggested that other types of inspections, things like PAMs, were filling the gap. So Penny Dash made some significant recommendations in her report, including that the CQC should, number 1, rapidly improve operational performance, fix the portal, improve the use of data, and improve the quality and timeliness of reports. Number 2, rebuild expertise within CQC and relationships with providers. Number 3, review the single assessment framework and ensure it was fit for purpose with greater focus on effectiveness and outcomes. And 4, clarify how ratings were calculated and make the results more transparent. The same day, October 15th, 2024, we also had Professor Sir Mike Richards' report. He had been tasked by CQC's board with reviewing the single assessment framework and its implementation. And he found, amongst other things, that CQC had been unable to fulfill its primary purpose. I always like to pause on that point because that is quite a big deal. Number 2, CQC staff were demoralized and angry. Number 3, policy and strategy had been separated. Number 4, the SAF was too complex and didn't allow for differences in size and organizations. So he also made a second set of recommendations, which included that a fundamental reset of the organization was needed. Relationships between inspection staff with relevant skills and experience and providers should be reinstated as soon as possible. Aspects of the single assessment framework should be retained with modifications. Other aspects should be scrapped, including the evidence categories and the scoring system. And lastly, that CQC should work closely in partnership with leaders of health and social care to design improved approaches to assessment and inspection. So just over a year on from these reports, where is CQC now? There's been quite a lot of introspection, consultation, and hiring of a whole new senior leadership team. Even that has not been without bumps in the road. On 23rd of October this year, Julian Hartley stepped down from his role as chief executive. And 18 months after the rollout of the SAF, CQC are proposing to revert to something that looks more like what we had before the SAF. And the purpose of the current consultation is to let you have your say about this. So today we're going to run through not only the consultation questions, but also some of the content to help you formulate your thoughts for CQC. Remember, the consultation closes very soon, 5 o'clock on the 11th of December. And now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Gemma to explain the current state of play.
Thanks a lot, May. So let's appreciate the current position. It's important to recognise that the consultation sets out proposals, but until a new regime is implemented, the SAF, I call it the SAF, Single Assessment Framework, remains in place. And as you know, the CQC has paused the scoring of evidence categories. And for that reason, in December 2024, they introduced the hybrid approach, which is effectively an IT workaround process, because even though the CQC are no longer scoring at evidence category level, their IT system currently requires inspectors to assign a nominal score to the evidence category. So they have to assign a nominal score to one evidence category for each quality statement. Draft reports also sometimes refer to moderation. Again, this is an IT workaround. Just want to make that clear because these processes have nothing to do with the new regime being proposed in the consultation. The consultation mentions the CQC's current priorities and the issues that they have been addressing. So they are listed on the slide. I'm not going to go through them in detail because the CQC have been repeating these over the last year. However, in relation to the CQC's priority of increasing the number of inspections, we have been tracking the numbers. There has been a marginal increase each month, but nothing major. January this year, the CQC produced 227 inspection reports for care homes and home care services combined. Last month, the figure was 306 inspection reports, so no huge increase. So moving on to the consultation, essentially the consultation is split into two parts. Part 1 sets out proposed changes to the CQC's assessment framework and guidance. And Part 2 sets out proposed changes to methods for inspecting, assessing and awarding ratings. Let's look at what will stay the same. So the 5 key questions, safe, effective, caring, etc., those will stay the same. Also the legislation, that hasn't changed. The Health and Social Care Act, all the relevant regulations as well. And neither has the CQC fundamental standards, and the rating categories are the same, outstanding, good, etc. Also, what hasn't changed is the established rating principles. So for example, the principle that if 2 or more key questions are rated inadequate, the overall rating will be inadequate. So here are the changes proposed in part 1 of the consultation. Sir Mike Richards has acknowledged that this change, or the changes, in part are a return to the previous regime. So he has said that they return us to the best of what we had before. Dealing with the last bullet point first, the CQC aimed to simplify language, balance the level of detail, and remove duplication and overlap. The CQC want to be more precise about what good care looks like, give clarity to providers on what the CQC need, and give clarity to the public on the standard of care they should expect. So we will look at the other points in more detail on the following slides. The CQC proposed to develop sector-specific frameworks. So back in 2023, we had sector-specific frameworks. In 2024, the SAF was introduced, which combined assessment frameworks into one. And then the CQC is now proposing to abandon the SAF and reintroduce assessment frameworks specific to each sector, led by the 4 chief inspectors. The CQC will introduce separate sector-specific frameworks, all built on the same consistent core content, with each framework adding the elements unique to its sector. The CQC also plans to publish extra supporting guidance explaining exactly what standards they'll look for and what evidence they'll use when inspecting services. The CQC proposes to reintroduce rating characteristics for each rating level. So as you know, we previously had rating characteristics which were supported by the key lines of inquiry, or the CLOEs, and prompt questions. Fast forward to 2024, the CQC brought together the CLOEs, prompt questions, and rating characteristics into a single set of 34 quality statements, which were supposed to describe what good quality care looked like. The CQC now plans to reinstate rating characteristics because people valued the detail that they provided. And they will use these to clearly describe what quality and safety look like at each rating level. And also to support the rating characteristics and provide structure to the assessment framework, the CQC proposed to develop a framework of supporting questions similar to the previous CLOEs. So the supporting questions will replace the current quality statements. So take a moment to read these quotes. Essentially, these quotes highlight that, from what I understand, there will be no further consultation on the rating characteristics or supporting questions. It is unclear whether there will be a further public consultation on the new assessment frameworks, and it appears that the CQC will use the responses to this consultation to develop and change the new assessment frameworks. So basically, this may be your only chance to comment on the new inspection regime. So make sure that not only do you respond, but comment widely and in detail on the assessment frameworks, rating characteristics, and supporting questions. Now, that said, this is the draft adult social care assessment framework revealed in the CQC online workshop yesterday that was led by Chris Badger, Chief Inspector of Adult Social Care. And as you can see, the 34 quality statements have been reduced to 24 lines of inquiry. That was the phrase that was used yesterday, so there is confusion already. This does not feature in the consultation, but hopefully this is going to be uploaded to the CQC's website before the consultation deadline so that people can comment. I will now hand over to Mei.
Thanks, Gemma. That's really helpful. We have a poll now, first poll of the day. Which proposed Part 1 change to the assessment framework do you think will have the biggest impact on your service? Please vote now. And then the answers should start popping up. Responses should start popping up. So it's looking like most of you, it's jumping around quite a lot. Actually, there's quite a good split between these answers. A lot of people think introducing sector-specific frameworks will be helpful. And I agree with that, actually, because when they moved away from that, it seemed like a repeat of an earlier mistake that they had made some years ago. Replacing the quality statements is also popular. Reducing duplication and simplifying requirements, also popular. Not sure yet. Yes, I think those of you who said that, I think it does remain to be seen. All right, let's move on now. Thank you for that. We're going to move on to the consultation questions themselves. So this is sort of the meat of the session today. And I'm going to read out what the consultation questions are and then turn to Joe and Anna to discuss what may be the key issues here. So consultation question 1, can we get rid of that? Okay, so get rid of the poll. To what extent do you agree that we should publish clear ratings characteristics of what care looks like for each rating as part of our new assessment frameworks? Joe, Anna?
Joe, do you want to start with that one?
And take myself off mute. To what extent do I agree? Probably 100%. I think it needs to be really clear what people are being measured against, and that's one of the problems with the SAF is that it hasn't been able to be clear enough. Really agree with everybody who's said that sector specific is going to make a positive change. I think much more clarity. We've got lots of new providers in the sector now, and you know, I would say yes, we should all agree with that. I agree with that.
I think I agree with you. And attending yesterday's meeting, that the thing that's really clear is that we do need to have specific areas. So if you're doing supported living, it needs to focus on that. You know, if you're doing dom care, it needs to be understood. It's not the same. Yeah. We deliver care, and we deliver high levels of care, but each of us deliver different types of care within the different sectors. So that is critical because each one is different. So, I mean, that's what I would say on that. And I think for all of us, this is absolutely why we need to answer these consultation questions. And we've only got till the 11th of December. So the more we understand, the more we can feed back.
Shall we move on to the second part? It's sort of a similar question. Now, question 1 is sort of quite bland in a way, but consultation question 2 and 2A, I'll just read them both out. To what extent do you agree with our proposed approach to developing assessment frameworks that are specific to each sector? And do you have any comments or suggestions on how we should develop the sector-specific assessment frameworks? That second question is a free text question, so people can answer that as they wish. But what are your thoughts on that, those questions?
For me, for 2A, I think this is the absolute opportunity for all of us to say exactly what we think. And one of the areas that we've talked about earlier, Joe and I, is that we have to ensure that the inspectors are using facts, not personal opinions. And that is really, really critical, because we all know there are times when an inspector comes in and has a personal view on something that doesn't match. And that was reassured yesterday, but I think all of us really have a job to do on that one. So that's your opportunity. It's your free text. It's your time to really kick back and say, this is critical. Joe?
I think the content of the sector-specific assessment frameworks needs to be developed by people who have worked in that sector. You know,
good point.
They have inspectors and assessors who have recently had to work across a number of different types of services. We need to bring that expertise back to the area where, you know, where there is the knowledge, but they also need to commit to that knowledge being up to date, because some of their people who have been out of the sector for a while may not be up to date with the latest guidance, advice, legal frameworks. And so they need to test that with providers, current providers, before it goes live. So they need to develop it with experts and test it against the market.
And I would just add, there needs to be some lived experience discussions as well. You know, individuals in that environment, how do they feel? What's important to them? So, you know, that is critical.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to consultation question 3 and 3A. To what extent do you agree with our proposed approach to making our assessment frameworks clearer and removing areas of potential duplication? And 3A, do you have any comments on the content of our single assessment framework or suggestions for how we should make our assessment frameworks simpler and clearer? Again, 3A is free text response, so you can put anything you want in that answer.
Yeah, I'm going to answer 3. It's absolutely essential. The duplication is just, you know, and it goes on.
It's almost a waste of a question.
And it's a waste of the time for the inspection. It's a waste of the time for the provider trying to answer that. It's duplicated. There's copious amounts of work. You know, you've given the same answer in different ways. How many more times can you do that? So it needs to be far more concise, far simpler for everybody, including the inspectors, to be able to give accurate answers in one shot. You don't need to keep doing it again and again and again. So when you go onto the free text, that's exactly the type of thing that you should be doing. Especially as you may have, you know, various people coming in, not just CQC, you've got local authority, you've got CHC, etc.
One of the big problems with a single assessment framework generally was it was overly complex. They've sort of admitted that now themselves. The scoring system, everything overly complicated. So yes, keep it simple, stupid, right? It's sort of guiding
also, when
principle.
you take duplication out, you immediately make it simpler. When there's duplication, it feels like it's designed to trip you up. You've answered it one way, and then you have to answer it again, and they're going to spot if you've got that slightly different. So that's taking all the duplication out is really important, because it's the first step in making it simpler and clearer, and it's the first step in building trust in the process. You can't trust the process if you think that process is deliberately setting out to trip you up.
But and I think just to add to that, for a new provider coming into the marketplace, that's really tough as well. You know, it is, as you've said, it's a bit of a catch you out. A lot of us are very used to doing this, so we're able to do it. But for a new provider, that's hard.
And new managers as well, right? Yeah. Okay. Do you think that they need to give some maybe helpful examples of what good looks like? Do we need more concrete things to guide us?
I would like to know that they know what good looks like. I think it's, you know, it's a slightly provocative thing to say, but yes, I think they should give examples of what good looks like, because So many years ago, they had a strapline of improving care, and it must be 10 or so years since that was dropped. It sounds from listening to Chris yesterday that they're moving back towards that. But if they're improving care, then they need to be able to clearly show the market what good looks like, so that everybody has it to aim for.
I'm just going to jump in there as well, though. With what good looks like, it goes back to personal and factual opinions. So you may go into a supported living environment with incredibly challenging behaviour where somebody's bedroom is trashed, doesn't look great, and that's how that person is living at that point. So it's about absolutely understanding the specific sectors and the delivery and the care.
Yeah. What about...
So it's a more person-centred reflection on what good looks like now, maybe?
Yeah, person-centred inspecting. What about testing and piloting this new thing? Because one of the problems that was very evident out of this whole implementation of the single assessment framework was they did some pilots and they did some consultation, and that consultation, the responses to that consultation just were not listened to. And then they rolled it out the way that they wanted to do it anyway, and the whole thing kind of imploded. So what should they be doing in terms of testing and piloting before rollout, do you think?
I mean, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? You should not launch something without checking it first. You know, you're not going to get into a car that no one's ever driven before that's, you know, brand new. So this does need to be piloted, and actually it needs to be piloted within each different specific area that they're talking about, because one size is not going to fit all. And exactly as Joe said, there are inspectors who are out of the loop because they got sent into pharmacy, and somebody else got sent into hospitals, and somebody else went into nurseries, for example. So, you know, the reality is it needs that. And there are lots of us who would say, I want to make this process work.
And I'd add to that, I'd say, don't just test that with big market oversized providers. Come out to care associations. We will find small and medium providers that you can test this with. It's really, really crucial that they do that. And the voice of, you know, there are thousands of small and medium providers out there. It's really crucial that it's tested with them as well.
And you base that around finances, don't you? So incomes, you know, a biggie cannot provide the same as a small one. And you have to understand that. Sorry, May.
I was just going to say, one of the criticisms of the single assessment framework was it didn't account for the difference in size between different providers. So one size does not fit all. And if it is geared only towards large providers or small providers, then you're going to have a problem, aren't you? One final sort of thought from you guys about this. What do you think providers need and managers need to be able to transition into this new system in terms of guidance?
I mean, it's really clear, isn't it? You almost need an idiot's guide. You need a manual, because the reality is, you know, we're not going to sit and go through hundreds of pages, but we need help as well. You know, we know what we're doing on a daily basis, or most of us do, but we need to be guided through what does good look like, because that's what we need to understand. What do we need to achieve to get there? What would you like to see from us as we move on? And are we going to grow together? You know, are you going to do regular check-ins with us? How are we doing, for example? You know, are CQC hitting the mark? So I think there needs to be not necessarily consultations, but lots more dialogue and collaboration between all of us. We're paying for this service after all.
So I think that for some managers, this will feel familiar, because it will be much more like how it used to be in the good old days. I can't believe I'm calling them that. For lots of providers who are new, lots of providers have entered the market since 2020, so may have never been inspected under the old regime, and may have had a SAF inspection. CQC needs to work with the associations more, the big ones and the small ones, like Anna's and mine, because we can support our local providers much more effectively and much more frequently than they can, but they need to tell us what's going on so that we can do that for them, and we're more than happy to.
And so just to add, I think one of the things we should also be doing is there are some incredibly skilled managers who've been here, exactly like Joe's just said, who are willing to mentor the new managers coming in. You know, it's really important that we support each other with this.
Yeah, good point. Okay, thank you. That's part one of the consultation. I'm going to hand over to Gemma now to talk about part two of the consultation.
Thank you. Thanks, May. So here are the changes proposed in part two of the consultation. So what I'll do is take each of them in turn. The CQC proposed to simplify ratings by replacing numeric scoring with professional judgment. And the SAF introduced scoring of evidence categories, as we've established, quality statements, and then also key question level. And back then, the aim was to help the CQC make consistent rating decisions, provide more transparency, and deliver a faster and flexible approach. But due to complexity, evidence categories scoring was soon abandoned. And also now the CQC proposed to do away with scoring altogether on the basis that it is too complex, not transparent, and too inflexible. So instead, the CQC intend to report clearly and in a structured way to support providers to understand their judgments. So instead of scoring evidence categories and quality statements, the CQC will conduct rounded assessments of evidence, you can see that on the right-hand side, with reference to rating characteristics. The CQC also proposed to support inspectors to deliver timely and expert inspections, publish impactful reports, and develop strong relationships with providers. As part of improvements to inspection and reports, the CQC are reviewing their IT and workforce. So in relation to IT, the CQC will roll out what they call replacement functionality. So this includes redeveloping the provider portal and registration system, examining how they use and share data to support improvements in the sector, and ensuring their systems are user-friendly and have the right functionality. Also, the CQC will consider how a service uses AI in line with regulations and will publish an AI statement in spring 2026. In relation to its specialist workforce, the CQC will continue to use experts by experience and external professional advisors. The aim is that inspection reports will be structured so that performance is clear against each part of the assessment framework that has been assessed. The intention is that reports will be quick and easy to understand for the public and contain sufficient detail for providers to understand why they have received a particular rating. So also strong relationships with providers. The CQC aim to foster professional relationships with providers that are based on mutual respect and trust. And the CQC recognise that these relationships are important in terms of continuity, expertise, and confidence. Importantly, the last point there, the CQC will consider the impact of inspections on the well-being of providers and the providers' staff. The CQC is proposing changes to inspection frequency. So there will be two main types of inspection activity: routine planned inspections, which are broad, detailed assessments and carried out on a 3 to 5 year cycle, depending on service type. And scheduling of these inspections will consider both positive and negative changes in quality over time. And then there's the rapid response inspections, so triggered by immediate or specific concerns, focused on areas of highest risk. So a couple of points to note here. Care homes will continue to receive unannounced inspections, but with a follow-up visit to meet the registered manager if needed. Not every inspection will cover the entire framework, but routine planned inspections will normally cover all 5 key questions before ratings are updated. The CQC aims to minimise mixing old and new evidence, ensuring updated ratings are not influenced by outdated findings. So we had a lot of that in the SAF. It appears that ratings are updated through an earlier than planned inspection, which will be triggered by concerns or complaints suggesting issues in a service. However, Chris Badger did say yesterday that he perceives a service with an old rating as a profound risk. So arguably then, services with old ratings should receive rapid response inspections. All in all, it looks like this proposal will be developed further because a new sector-specific frequency schedule will be produced once the new regime is established. So I'll hand back to Mei.
Thanks. Yeah, that point about old ratings, I think that remains to be seen, but it would be a very good thing if they could update people's ratings because so many people are languishing in RI, etc. Right, let's have another poll. How confident are you that moving away from numeric scoring towards professional judgment will lead to fairer ratings? It's ticking along. It's ticking along. Yeah, there's quite a mix of views on this question as well. Quite a few people are not confident, and I would surmise that that is perhaps because of the historic sort of lack of constancy and proportionality that we see in ratings and judgments. Some people are somewhat confident, and other people are concerned. Only a few people are very confident that it will be helpful. Interesting, and I think, it remains to be seen. So thank you for that. Let's end that poll and move on to, let's get rid of that. Let's move on to the consultation questions for the second part of the consultation. Number 4, Anna and Joe, to what extent do you agree that we should award ratings directly at key question level with reference to ratings characteristics? And 4A, do you have any comments or suggestions on our proposed approach to awarding ratings?
Joe, do you want to go first on that one?
I mean, I do agree. I think that, so I think the scoring system, the numerical scoring system, was too complex, and that people didn't realise where an old score would keep them, for instance, in requires improvement, and were bitterly disappointed when that happened. And it's so unclear and so difficult to do the work that you need to do yourself to go through all of your scores and work out where you might be vulnerable to that. So I do think that it's a good thing that that is removed, but I really appreciate people's reticence and lack of confidence around it coming down to a more subjective view again. And in the past, we really did have inspectors who, for whatever reason, didn't like a service, maybe didn't get on with a manager, and it felt like they would, it would be a punitive approach. One of the things that I think could happen here that would be beneficial, if I think back to the old days, it always felt like requires improvement and good were really broad categories, and you could never quite understand where you fell within those. So you could have been requires improvement and close to inadequate, or requires improvement and nearly good, but you wouldn't necessarily know that, and CQC were never prepared to tell you. So something that enabled a provider to understand where they fall within the various ratings would be really helpful, and maybe that is something that could be drawn out of the way they score, where that puts you. I don't even know if I'm phrasing this in a kind of understandable way, but I think when I do my response to them on behalf of Wiltshire Care Partnership, I will try to put that through as leave providers with a clearer sense of where they are within a rating.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, one of the comments that was made yesterday was that this should be seen as a tool for improvement. So there's an acknowledgement of that, and I think you're right. My concern, again, would be talking about experts by experience. Have they had the right training? Do they understand how this works? Because an expert by experience doesn't necessarily have the full understanding of what a registered manager and a care provider has to deliver. So that's also really important. And I think, going back to the ratings characteristics, it's absolutely critical that they're understood by the inspector, because I've been supporting providers, and I know May and Gemma have, where the inspector said, I don't really understand how I'm supposed to mark this. No one's really explained. So everybody has to work from the same facts and figures with the same ratings characteristics and understand what they mean.
Yeah. I think from my point of view, the ratings characteristics being a word, something in words, as opposed to number. The numerical scoring just seemed really nonsensical. It was very difficult to tell or make any kind of argument about a numerical score being given to something. And, you point about the old evidence being mixed in. That just made the whole thing a nonsense, really, because it was just about a proportionality of, how much evidence was new and how much evidence was old. And sometimes there wasn't a snowball's chance that you could actually get a meaningful determination in a particular area. So I think that the ratings characteristics will be very helpful in terms of, as you say, both the providers and managers' understanding, but also the inspector's understanding of what is relevant.
To add to that, May, with 4A, this is everybody's opportunity on this webinar to really go to town on that, because that's the bit that's critical for you as providers, registered managers, to say this is what matters.
I just want to pick up on the point around relationships with providers as well. And I wonder whether the lack of confidence about the new approach is possibly down to the very distant relationship CQC has had with providers over the last few years, and inspections being few and far between. And we don't need a teddy bear to walk through the door and inspect a service, but having a relationship with people is part of what helps them to understand a service as much as it helps a provider to understand what they should be doing.
Particularly where a red flag has come across CQCs when they're doing a responsive inspection, a red flag has come across CQC's radar. They go in looking for that negative issue. And if there's no relationship there, then, you're stuffed, right? So that's very important. Okay, let's move on to consultation question 5. Do you have any comments or suggestions for how we should support our inspection teams to deliver expert inspections, impactful reports, and strong relationships with providers? Again, free text.
I mean, I think one of the things none of us will ever forget is the Ofsted situation with the headmistress. And, for me, I raised that yesterday in the meeting. You have to understand if the decision is that it is requiring improvement or there is a major problem, how are you going to deliver that? You have to still deliver it with kindness. Yes, people are going to be at risk and that has to be managed. But actually, again, it's about using the right judgment, facts, not personal. And like you've just said, Jo, people haven't had the opportunity to build up the relationships they used to have. There were the days when we could pick up the phone to our inspector and go, this is going on. I don't really understand it. Can you help me? And you would have that support a lot of the time. So we need to be able to go back to that. We need to be able to have a situation we can just pick up the phone and ask for support. With the Dorset Care Association, our CQC team are members. They join us regularly and they are really supportive, but in other areas they're not. So for me, if this is going to be delivered, it has to be delivered with kindness, with understanding, yes, monitoring the risk and not allowing anybody to be hurt, but we must work on relationships.
When that awful situation with Ofsted happened, I did have managers who approached me and confidentially said they had felt the same at times. That is devastating and harrowing and tragic. That cannot be allowed to continue.
We're still seeing that now on the ground, and it is appalling.
So I would add to that then, where, for example, care associations have got strong relationships with their CQC teams, that they are regularly invited to meetings. They do get to know the providers. The providers are able to reach out to them. And I think that is really critical, because the whole point here is all that really matters to all of this is the end user, the people we support.
What should be the mechanism then if the empathy and the understanding isn't there? What should be the mechanism? Do you think that the current complaints process is fit for purpose in this respect?
No, I don't. And again, we don't even know where it goes, do we? And we don't know how it's managed. So I think by having a possibly good relationship with the lead inspector for that team, and you can build that up, that even if a provider isn't confident to go direct to the lead inspector, that they could potentially go to the care association or somebody similar and say, I need help, could you support me to do this? Because that's what we're here for. We're here to support people to go through that. And then we've got links with RWK, for example, to say, okay, we need to go to DEFCON 2.
I mean, I don't think it ever has been, May. I don't think the complaints process ever has been fit for purpose.
I agree with you. And the responses come very, very, very late, and then it's effectively meaningless. What about, what could we do? What about having like a code of conduct for inspectors? Does there need to be something like that?
I mean, that's an incredibly good suggestion, isn't it? Because if everybody's working to the same rules and they apply to everybody, and therefore you didn't adhere to rule 7.4, that's a conversation that needs to be had. And we should be able to have the same sort of conversations. We're being scored, so right back at you.
Right. Okay. Let's go to consultation question 6. To what extent do you agree with the approach to following up assessments and the principles for updating ratings judgments? And do you have any comments on our proposed approach?
Jo?
I mean, everybody has got providers in their area who've been stuck in RI for years, can't get, feel they've done the improvement work and can't get anybody out to assess them for love nor money. And their QA team at their local authority may be very happy that they've done the work, but it's really frustrating. What that ultimately does is it affects businesses' viability, and it therefore affects delivery of care and sustainability of care. And so yes, I obviously completely 100% agree that they need a better process for updating rating judgments. I suppose my skepticism is around that being a high enough priority when they don't have enough inspectors and assessors on the ground for somebody to be actually taking ownership of that in a team and making sure it happens in a timely manner. So I still fear that it will be the thing that gets kicked into the long grass, I suppose.
And I guess that's where the free text conversation has to be, that is critical. And I think I would probably say, May, I think I'm right, or Gemma, it's at the moment 1 inspection per inspector per month at the moment is what they're averaging. And, you know,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just.
They're doing around 300. What were the numbers, Gemma? 300 or so.
306. Yeah.
306 adult social care inspections, care homes, and home care per month, which is really no better than they have been doing all along. You know, they say that they're increasing the number, but we don't see. We're tracking the numbers each month, and we don't see them.
But again, that's down to you know, an inspector to really think about that and say, well, I've walked away, but actually they're working really hard, they're keeping me informed, I need to keep an eye on them. So it's about building those relationships up again, isn't it, and being able to go back in a timely manner. But exactly as we said, are the resources there, and how much of an importance is it? Well, it's incredibly important to a registered manager and a care provider who have done everything they've been asked to do, delivered, achieved, and then no one comes back.
We've written to them about services that are stuck at inadequate and asked them to re-inspect, and they've told us it's not a priority. And I sort of thought, well, if that's not a priority, then what is the priority? And at the same time, we went back to the special measures guidance, which used to say that they would re-inspect within 6 months when a service was rated inadequate, and that had been changed without any significant announcement of that change. So that it no longer said we will re-inspect within 6 months when the service is inadequate. So that kind of tells you the sort of level of operations that was going on at the time.
Well, just to add, sorry, mate, there's a duty of care. There's a duty of care here as well to that provider and the people they support. And you know, if somebody's on an embargo or if there's a block put on and they've done all the work they need to do, they need to make profit to keep that building, those people supported. So that the impact is catastrophic.
It's like a siege. You're being starved. The other thing that I wanted to touch on here, it's not sort of specifically about following up assessments, but the routine planned assessments are supposed to be every 3 to 5 years. Thoughts on that?
I've got a thought on that, which is flips it slightly. I just was looking at their funding structure. 41% of their funding comes from adult social care providers, and they get 263 million a year overall. So you can do the sums on that. But if you're not being re-inspected for over 5 years, you have to really question the value for money that you're getting every year, paying their fees, which go up significantly. So I think it's worth saying something in the consultation about, I am paying for a service here. I am paying for a service that regulates my activity and proves to either my local authority or my private customers that I'm doing it right, doing it properly, doing it well, being, you know, it's good. So I really think that providers within this consultation do need to reflect on, when did I last have an inspection, an assessment, whatever we're calling it now, and how much has that cost me in fees since then?
And just to finish on that, you know, and there are some providers with outstanding ratings that they've had for 5+ years. Isn't there a risk attached to that as well? Just because you're outstanding once, it doesn't mean you're going to continue to be that level, but they tend to be left alone longer.
Okay. Question 7 relates to the NHS. We're going to skip that one because it's very, very long and a little bit less relevant. Consultation question 8. We'd like to hear what you think about the opportunities and risks to improving equality and human rights in our proposals. Do you think our proposals will affect some groups of people more than others? For example, those with a protected equality characteristic, such as disabled people, older people, or people from different ethnic backgrounds. Please tell us if the impact on people would be positive or negative and how we could reduce any negative effects.
Yeah, I mean, one of the conversations that took place yesterday was, you know, in terms of improving equality and human rights, actually some of the inspectors need to have ongoing training in these areas. You know, do they fully understand them? Are they able to converse with somebody who may be non-verbal, who may use BSL, who may speak a different language? You know, we have to have a view from everybody. And if you cannot work with that person and get their views on the home they're living in or the service that they're being supported in, how do you understand that, Jo?
I've known of situations where people have received an adverse rating because they were trying to provide person-centered care for people who actually, I can think of one who had somebody from the gypsy traveller community living in a care home. He was living in a building for the first time in his life. So actually he did a lot of his stuff outdoors. They were rated RI. The manager was penalised. It was a really unfortunate situation because CQC had just failed to reflect on what his life had been like before, what he was used to, what he knew, and how he wanted to be.
Yeah, that person-centeredness is really important, isn't it?
It is, and it's actually, you know, yes, we've got the duty to make sure that we can evidence that and how we got to that point.
Yeah.
But there's also that need to understand that one size doesn't fit all. People are different. Exactly the example you just gave, Jo, is absolutely critical.
That's a really good example.
It really, really is. And, you know, you might arrive and somebody's behaviours are really challenging and the staff are working with it in their own way. The inspector doesn't understand. They're a type 1 diabetic and they're having a hypo. You know, do these things, are they understood?
Yeah. And that's where the listening is really important. They need to listen. And it's difficult sometimes to advocate for yourself and your clients, you know, in your service, because you're trying to manage the day-to-day. You might feel really stressed because the inspectors are in, you know, grilling you and stuff. But I guess we all need to sort of stand up and explain, no, this person isn't used to living inside, you know, for whatever reason, and just really give a clear explanation. And if you can't do it on the day, do it afterwards immediately, following up to explain that situation, particularly if it's criticized in the feedback. I would be going straight back on that kind of thing.
But doesn't it then go back to factual and personal?
Yeah,
every time.
Absolutely. Last question. Do you have any other comments on our work, things we should consider, or suggestions for how we could improve?
I would say we
big
were talking, it is. And we were talking earlier, the four of us, about a conversation about AI, actually, and how it's used in the workplace. And the conversation was that it should be used by inspectors in innovation. And actually, it's really important to me that we are able to use AI positively and effectively. And that, again, inspectors need to understand how it can be used to support people and also how it can be used negatively. So that's one of the other things. It is something that we're using more and more. It's something we need. One of the things I said yesterday is that actually it reduces some of the work that we have to do and increases the time we get to spend with individuals on a one-to-one basis. So that is actually quite important to me. The other bit is, I think, in terms of whistleblowing, that needs to slightly change. Whistleblowing is critical and it has to take place. But we all know we've got a lot of what we call vexatious complainers. So we've got family members who get angry. We've got staff who, unfortunately, haven't made the grade and have been asked to leave, and they pick up the phone and they make all these allegations, and there's this sudden knee-jerk reaction. Now, if it's the very first time it's ever happened, you know, yes, we probably do need to respond. But if it keeps happening again and again and again because a new provider or an existing registered manager has said, okay, this team isn't working, we need to make some changes, I really want the inspection teams to just take 5 before they go flying in. Whistleblowing is important, don't get me wrong, but we do need to understand a lot of registered managers have got staff who've been unhappy or really difficult families, and the impact on them when it goes on and on and on is monumental.
Yeah, I've seen it where people have said, I'm going to shut you down. And they go on with a barrage of complaints and things.
Mine would be around the culture, May. I would come back to what I said earlier on about I think they've been an enforcement agency for the last 10 years or so. They now seem to want to be a care improvement agency again as a regulator. They need to commit to the resource needed to do that culture change within, to make that real. It's all very well that the directors say it on calls like the one we had yesterday, that needs to cascade down and be embedded on the ground. And that needs to be a priority. They need to dedicate time, space and resource to do that.
Well, I agree, and we've got a huge amount. They have got a huge amount of trust to build up with all of us on this call, because we've been battered, and I do actually appreciate that some of the inspectors, because they haven't had the resources, they've been kind of put into very difficult situations. But it's actually now their time to make us trust them again, build confidence in them again. They need to be transparent and they need to be open. And this consultation ends at 5 p.m. on the 11th of December. We have to have our say, and everybody listening to this, I know it's yet another survey, but this one is actually really very important. But then, Gemma, May, we need to hear that we've been listened to, because yesterday there was a couple of things where I felt quite strongly, well, you seem to have already made that decision and you're still doing a consultation.
Right. Let's move on. Poll 3. What area do you feel CQC most needs to improve to strengthen inspection quality and provider experience? So we have inspector training and expertise, transparency and clarity of frameworks, digital systems and data platforms, feedback and complaints process for providers, and minimizing duplication and reducing burden.
It's difficult to choose one, isn't it?
It is difficult to choose one. All of the above. We should have had an all of the above button.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are saying the transparency and clarity of frameworks, and I do agree with that, because if you don't know what you're being measured against, it's very difficult to know what you need to do. Inspector training and expertise also very high on the list, and I agree with that as well. Right, moving on then. Gemma, do you want to take us through what we can expect this year, 2026?
Yes. So this is based on a press release that went out last week, Thursday, and also yesterday's workshop. So things to look out for next year. So early next year, there'll be more information on the framework, rating characteristics and supporting questions. So that will be published early next year. From spring, the CQC will be analysing and responding to feedback from this consultation. Also in the spring, it will be testing and piloting the methodology internally and with a selection of providers. In the summer, the CQC will be publishing the final assessment frameworks and developing supporting guidance. And the aim is to implement the new regime by the end of 2026. I will say, obviously, with the SAF, we saw how deadlines moved. So this is what they say now.
Yeah, more like targets than deadlines. Right. So then we have a summary of the takeaways today. CQC is trying to simplify and provide a clearer, more fair system. A lot of the fundamentals will remain the same or revert to the pre-SAF system. And basically, I would urge you to have your say. CQC consulted before they implemented the SAF, but they didn't really listen to the feedback very well. So it would appear that they're now listening, because they've had their fingers burned once. Let's hope that's the case. And if they're not listening, then we'll need to sort of speak up about it again. Moving on, there is an upcoming in-person event in London on the 10th of December, but that is full, we understand. Consultation deadline again on the 11th, and there's an online focus group for people who use services on the 16th. I think we now just have 5 minutes for Q&A. Joe, are you monitoring the questions? Are there any questions for the group?
I think while we're just looking at that, I was just going to say a couple of bits to me is that I would really like to see a very timely response to the consultation. I think that's absolutely critical. Don't leave us hanging. Don't leave us waiting. And I think the as you said earlier, May, the test phase, it can't be the biggie sat at the top tables. It just can't. It has to be anything from somebody just caring for 5 people, right up to. So we've got to have a really good selection. And I think the other bit for me is they need to stop hemorrhaging money that we're giving to them. So there's some of the points that really kind of feature for me.
Yeah. So there's some questions in here. There's some agreement around how frustrating it has been. Does CQC have they published a roadmap for testing? I don't believe they have yet, Hilary. I'm sure that will be shared through all of our networks as soon as it's possible. I don't think there is a report from what Chris Badger said yesterday. I imagine they might be producing some FAQs or something from that. Again, I haven't seen anything yet.
No, I agree. I think we've got Julie's asking, is the survey only open to registered managers to complete? No, it's not only open to registered managers. It's open to individuals working within the care sector. So, you know, you can respond to that, as can care associations. And then we've got, I am the proprietor of a care home, and do you have useful tools for care providers to cross-reference, as we've just said? I mean, no, but we can put some together. You know, we can work with what we've got, can't we, May?
Yeah.
I think there's a question in here about whether there's been any learning from Ofsted that's been passed and shared with CQC. I think they were. I mean, obviously there were reports and investigations into that, and I think they were shared with CQC. I think CQC made it very clear at that point that it wasn't going to move away from the kind of inadequate rating that it gives, that it wasn't going to change or reword any of how it presents that in response to the Ofsted situation. So yes, I think it was shared. No, I don't think it was particularly acted upon, and we still have those ratings, and so, you know, that leads me to believe that that was the case.
I think if you get that kind of situation, get some help. You know, we can push back on that kind of situation. We've done that. We've had to do that recently, sadly. And they did back off a bit.
There's comments in here about the need for a triangulated post-inspection follow-up. Really, really good point from Mary. And people saying, you know, Susan is saying she hasn't been inspected for almost 5 years. What will they even inspect us under? That's a really good question, because they've implemented bits of this whilst their consultation is still open. So I don't know whether May or Gemma are able to comment on that.
I mean, I think it's obviously the consultation process. They should have put out that assessment framework before they put the consultation out. I think that's quite disappointing. So I'm hoping that something goes on the website as to what we saw yesterday from Chris Badger in time for the deadline on the 11th.
Our slides will be sent to all of you so that you can see that. You'll have that. And Gemma, can you just move to the next slide?
Can I just answer one very quick question?
Yeah, sure.
I picked up on further back. I think Joe touched on it, but somebody's made a really, really valid point. The public don't really understand how we're marked or scored. So wouldn't it be really helpful as well for there to be a handout or something we could send to the people that we support and their families to understand how we got to where we got, why we got this rating? Because actually people go RI, and sometimes it hasn't been a fair outcome, and sometimes it's been fair, but this is what we're doing to put it right. So I think that's another way we need to educate people on, you know, what we're up against and how we're marked and scored and get a rating.
Right. So what I was going to say is somebody asked how they can access the consultation. It is on CQC's website. This is the QR code for that page. And as I said, we're going to send you guys the slides, so you will have that. CQC has received about 1,000 responses so far. And given that there are around 30,000 registered adult social care services in England, I hope that they will receive many, many more. The next slide is just a slide about our law firm and all the services that we provide. If you do need help from us, we will be delighted to help. And then lastly, I just wanted to say thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope you found it helpful. I'd also like to do a huge thank you to Joe and Anna and the Care Association Alliance for partnering with us on this webinar. Local care associations do a tremendous amount to support providers, and if you're not a member, I would urge you to consider joining your local care association. You'll get more information, you will get support, you can call them if you have an issue. But
the bottom line is, please fill in the consultation. You know, people are very quick to say afterwards, well, no one listened, but if you haven't filled it in, they're not going to. So it's our duty to do this.
Right, couldn't have said it better myself. With that, we will close, and thank you, everybody. Bye.